This is my story. This is my story. This is my song. We define ourselves, whether we know it or not, by the story that we tell. And the story that we tell is by what we believe, what we think, and how we treat other people. And so the story that we have is a culmination, an encyclopedia, a library of other stories that we've collected over the years. Some we've accepted and grafted onto our own story, and some we've rejected and decided that's who we are. And life is really just about engaging in stories. That's why so many of the ancients were such gifted storytellers, not just because they didn't have the technology that we have today, but because it was a way for the community to gather and hear stories about things they personally were too young to have experienced, but that had shaped them nonetheless. And so the elders tell the stories. And so today we engage in that same kind of storytelling in the sacred text of the book of Exodus. And I don't know if you noticed during the scripture reading, but the word complaining shows up a lot. The Israelites are complaining. They're complaining to Moses and Aaron. Moses to Aaron. Are they complaining? Yes, Moses, they're complaining. Oh, goodness, they're complaining. Israelites, are you complaining? Yes, we're complaining. We were better off dead. And then God says, I understand somebody's complaining. Complaining. So it's like, this is the heritage of our story. Grumble. Last week, we stepped both feet into the call of Moses. We just jumped right into it. And we focused on his doubts and his objections. We know the story from there, though, right? I mean, we know the story of Moses. He has Aaron speak for him because he's got some speech things he's not sure about. And he uses that staff that he can turn into a snake. And with God's power, creates many signs and wonders, the plagues. We remember the plagues, don't we? Many signs. And then the greatest act, the parting of the Red Sea. The sea dramatically parts and the people walk on dry land on the seabed. Now, for scale, don't worry about it and get too dramatic. Think Geist Reservoir, not Pacific Ocean, if you're thinking about size. The sea closes, though, after they make it across, and it drowns all the soldiers that were in pursuit to kill, or at best, enslave them again. Can you imagine what it was like to be them? The Israelites, not the drowned soldiers. What must it have been like? I want you just to imagine with your sacred imagination for just a second, the string of events that they went through in just a few days. It was just a short time ago for them when they had heard a rumor that some weird shepherd from the wilderness and his brother were standing before Pharaoh demanding your freedom. Then you witnessed the water turning to blood, frogs, lice and gnats, flies, livestock pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then the fear at night as you ate lamb and were terrified to breathe as death walked the streets. And then the quiet of the night would later be shredded with the screams of grief of Egyptian parents who had just found a dead child. That's the string of events these Israelites have gone through. And now, you've just walked through a body of water that you could not have crossed unless you had a boat or were a really strong swimmer. And as you walked on the ground that had previously been covered by water, it was dry. You've just walked through the Red Sea, and as the water calms, there's no one behind you, and ahead of you is absolutely nothing. Just a fresh start. But then, just a little while later, you realize you have no food, no shelter, no plan. You have to be confused. This is deliverance? This was the plan of freedom? Just when the Hebrews think they're home free, delivered out of slavery by the mighty hand of God, they find themselves struggling in the wilderness with barely enough to eat. Ready for a life of freedom, they're given decades of wandering instead. Wilderness leaves them utterly lost, questioning whether this is any better than their enslavement was. They're confused and in shock, and their version of what deliverance should look like is not this disoriented version of life that they are living. God never promised them they would be given freedom for prosperity. God promised they would be free to a better life, but that it would be a journey. So liberation leads to wilderness. But really, for something this big, shouldn't there be a catered party? Should there be a catered party with a great spread just on the edge of the wilderness? A little bit of a time of transition before we go wandering for generations? Shouldn't there be a celebration and nice chairs to sit in and just in complete comfort and luxury? Shouldn't the other side of the coin of slavery be comfort? But it's our journey too, isn't it? We have things that we need freedom from. Or at least we have things we really, really would like to have freedom from. We want to be free from this boss, this relationship, this addiction, until we get free. What does that freedom look like? It looks like the wilderness of learning to date again after many years. It looks like making tough decisions of how to earn money and how to revitalize your resume. Freedom leads to the wilderness to give us the opportunity to ask the question, who are you now? God says that in Exodus. He says, I'm going to test them to see if they can follow me, to see if they can figure out who they are. Who are you now? Now that this part of your life is ended, who are you becoming? And who is it that you want to be? We've had bad experiences and had this fantasy of what our freedom from whatever would look like. And once we're there, it's nothing like what we imagined. Our fantasy is oversimplified and it does not stand up well to real life. Challenges we never imagined. For addiction, it's even more extreme. Getting sober, free of addiction, it's not easy, but staying sober is even harder. So whatever that is for you, that, if I can just get there, if I can just get free from this, once I'm here, I will be free. You better be careful, because it will not be the way you imagine it right now. And if you do not put it into God's hands now and be willing to wander in the wilderness to find your new path, you may get lost. And that's what we're trying to understand today through this storytelling and this powerful reminder of God's presence and how critical it is to trust God daily, renewed to follow. The question is not whether or not the freedom is worth it. Don't hear me saying that. It is worth it. But it really explains, or I think it does, why the Hebrews would actually say, I think we had it better in Egypt. At least there we had regular meals. According to Discovery Channel, they actually got to drink beer. I don't know why that's not in the Bible. That'd be, kind of a cool part of the whole story. But it was very nutritious and hydrating, and the Egyptians thought it was a great idea for these slaves to have more energy while they were building all these all these things that were only for the Egyptians' use. But freedom is worth it. And you've had, many experiences of liberation in your life, and you will have more, but knowing that it will bring disorientation instead of peace immediately is really important to think about ahead of time. Freedom is worth it, but the wilderness will provide deeper gifts if we walk into it with the right attitude. So yes, the Hebrews complained. Okay, they not only complained, they were really honked off. I mean, if complaining is here, what they were doing was probably about here. They are completely unabashed in their complaining. They are complaining directly to God, directly to Aaron and Moses. They don't care. They are just not happy, and they're letting anyone who will listen have it all. They complain loudly and long. They detail their grievances. They accuse Moses of murderous intent. They say they wish they were dead. They go so far as to claim it was better to be enslaved than to suffer this. Clear, honest complaint. And then this begins the interchange with God. But friends, I don't know if you've ever thought about this story this way, but I want you to listen. The Hebrews are not slaves to God. They're not slaves to God like they were to Pharaoh. Yes, God is powerful, but so is Pharaoh. But see, part of being free is to own how we feel. God gives them space to just let it out. God doesn't say, Moses, you better get them to stop this or I'm going to get mad. No. God doesn't say, don't you make me turn this Red Sea around. Y'all going to get it. If I hear one more peep, beep, oh, that's it, That's it. No, that's not God. They have had generations of fear, and now they are owning their own lives. For the first time, they can complain without fear. They're free. I'm sure they complain quietly in their own homes about the quality of life in Egypt. But here they are free to completely let God and Moses have it. It's like a movie where people save up for vacation only to find out none of the promises were real when they arrived. I imagine the Hebrews saying something like, this was not on the brochure. This is not what we thought when you said, hey, would you like to be free? And we're like, well, yeah, that'd be great. So for our journey, we can complain. We can complain. We can acknowledge that just as our previous life experience was intolerable, we can feel the next stage is a little bit too. It may be a different kind of intolerable. Might not be what we thought it would be, but that's okay. That's what spending time wandering a little bit helps us do. It takes a long time to get the Hebrew out of Egypt, but even longer to get the Egypt out of the Hebrew. So what do we have to complain about, both in our individual lives or things that we have to complain about as a group? What could we discover about ourselves and God if we just let it rip like the Hebrews did? You see, God didn't make a path through the wilderness like God did in the Red Sea, but God could have. God didn't. Just standing in the midst of the trees and the animals, reduced to your basic identity as a creature, what would you be thinking? Well, after I let it rip with my criticism and complaining, I would realize I'm still stuck in the woods. I can complain and be stuck in the woods, or I can just be stuck in the woods. Just being stuck uses less energy. If I resolve to accept where I'm at, I'm going to have some facts hit me pretty quickly. What would hit you standing there? What would you think? I'd be completely aware that I am utterly in need of the help given by Moses and Aaron and this new God, this God that saved me to now keep me alive. So my complaining isn't doing any good anyway. I can have my opinions, but the greater importance is to figure out how we're going to stay alive. So in the wilderness, or in the wilderness of our transition to a new normal, we can also be sustained by God. We can be unsure and complain, or we can just be unsure. We can be surprised and a little disappointed with this new part in our life and complain, or we can just be surprised and see what tomorrow brings. God heard the cries of God's people, and now God gets to hear all the complaints. But God does not magically zap them out of the wilderness and into a cushy life with all the trimmings. Instead, God gives them what they need to stay in the wilderness and walk through it safely. God heard their cries in captivity, and God hears them now. God could easily have responded by granting their death or sending them back to Egypt. But God doesn't. God doesn't do either one. Instead, God offers the people concretely and directly the food that they have asked for, one day at a time. And Jesus knew this would be important for us to remember, grafting it onto his story and then onto ours. Reminding us to remember and to relearn each day, give us this day our daily bread. It's not just a traditional prayer, it's a reminder. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. God does not abandon them, punish them, or starve them. God feeds them, but it can't be preserved. Anyone who tried to hoard it, when they went to eat it next time, it was moldy. It must be eaten the day it is harvested, except for the one carryover because of what? The Sabbath. The manna is just enough. God offers food from the moment to moment on a daily basis. Manna is not something that the people can hoard, and it is not transferable. There is no Costco bulk supply manna thing here. God performs no spectacular act like sending plagues or insects or parting the sea, but in fact, we can imagine it may have been underwhelming, even disappointing. Manna again. Oi, with the manna, right? But God puts the Hebrews in the vulnerable position of seeking their sustenance daily, and thereby relying on divine provision instead of counting on the surplus of tomorrow. If God provides and you're able to hoard and to set back and to accumulate, if you have a surplus of God's blessings, how long do you think it will be before that surplus is identified by you as yours and yours alone? You went out and got it, it's yours. How long before you forget it was God who provided and all you did was go and collect and organize? How long before you resist sharing with someone else who didn't collect as much as you? Or maybe they couldn't. How much is enough? What sustains us but must be renewed day by day? Do we seek spectacular acts from God, airdrops of huge crates of food, or doubling of our numbers, or grand praise from the powerful? How might simple and concrete food for our lives be enough? And help us to remain thankful for what God provides and generous to share with others. As I was writing this in my office this week, I took a break to get some water at the cooler so I could have one of my new favorite things. Hold on. Zero sugar Hawaiian punch. Yes, it's a thing. You look in my office, there's like a little case of the little Hawaiian punch guy in little red boxes, and each box has I don't know how many sleeves, and each sleeve does a water bottle. Yeah. So I was getting ready to go get my Hawaiian punch. But the last bottle was empty, and the cooler was blinking red, which meant there was no more water. My first thought was, darn it, I should have gotten a gallon jug and filled it up and put that in my office so I would always have enough for my Hawaiian punch. Then I would have plenty. Then I got to thinking that would cause the water cooler to run out more quickly for other people. Then I got to thinking, what about the preschool kids and the people that use the building throughout the week? If I took a whole gallon of it, there would be way less for them to have. And they wouldn't get anything to drink. So I kind of learned through a selfish reflection moment that it's better to do without a little bit from time to time and work together so more are able to have some water. And special shout out to Howard and the trustees for making sure the water is resupplied. So if you go get a drink of water after service, there will be water. Why? Because they refilled it. Because they always do. So there is no need to hoard it. You just might have to be patient from time to time. It might not always provide itself on your schedule, your timetable, or your preference. You know why? Because we live in community. And sometimes it's not always about us. But we get to be present, and we get to share. We get to enjoy water too. And as delicious as this is, it's okay to wait until Sunday morning and use it as a sermon illustration. Because somebody's probably thinking, he usually has the Cubs cup of water. Why has he got the red bottle? Yeah, it won't be here next week, but while it's here, I mean, it'd be a shame not to enjoy it, right? I grew up with Hawaiian punch. That whole experience of taking that tin can and that little triangle with the poke, I don't think kids today know even how to use one of those. They would probably open it and be like, why is it not coming out? Because you got to poke a hole on the other side for the air to get going so the Hawaiian punch can come out, right? Sorry, kid of the 80s. But it's important to get back to the sermon, it's important for us to remember that we have active participation in not just sustaining ourselves, but that we are in community with others. God requires our active participation in God's saving work. And as this World Communion Sunday is upon it, we do not think about ourselves and our limitations of the map that is drawn around our township or our state or our nation or our hemisphere. We now understand through World Communion and through the teachings of Jesus that we're all part of one body. That every human being is made in the image of God. And that whatever lines we tend to draw are nowhere near as important as the sacredness that each human being holds. And so with the manna, the people must go out and gather it. Each day, gather only enough for that day. God does not spoon feed them or do the gathering for them. They have to get up every day. They have to go out and find their provision. So how do you think that this served them from their community that is this embodied practice? How do you think that part of the story has shaped them in their cooperation and their trust in this God? Day by day over time, that God continues to show up. They continue to trust. God continues to show up. So doing the thing, the necessary and the important thing that sometimes we lack motivation to do is what builds our faith as much as doing the thing. Showing up for Bible study and worship and working at the food pantry. Showing up and doing the thing is important, but keeping the motivation to keep going and showing up has as much sacredness as the helping and the action does. Because it's an embodiment of our trust and our love in God. Keep going. It builds our faith. So what does it look like for us, and how can we participate in God's saving work? So in that work, in that wilderness, we can see the glory of God. Because it was in the wilderness that the Hebrews saw God's glory. It seems like seeing the glory of God would happen on a mountaintop or at a moment of triumph. No, it's here in the wilderness with no map, no resources, no cache of food or water to rely on, maybe some water. And that moment of wondering if they have enough, that is when the Hebrews encounter God directly. Exodus 16:10 describes the crowd turning to face the wilderness as though trying to envision the manna there. And what do they see? The glory of God. There has been nothing like this sort of encounter with Yahweh up to this point for them, for this wandering people. It's the only time that the people, they enter the wilderness and they complain. And that's when God's glory appears. What do you think the connection is between wandering in the wilderness? And in the midst of not knowing, in the midst of uncertainty, God reveals God's self to you. Jesus told us that if we've seen Him, then we've seen God. So God is revealed in Jesus. And the glory of God is that mystical and intimate physical and emotional experience where we experience God's love and we feel connected to God and to one another. So when you gather in a group and you recognize that everyone there loves you or appreciates you, whether in a prayer circle holding hands, a dojo, a classroom, a table enjoying a meal, some connected moment with others, God's Spirit provides witness to God's glory to give you hope and to keep you going. You felt it. You felt it when you feel seen and heard and valued. And friends, the church is nothing more than a community that is intentionally trying to provide those experiences for all who would walk through those doors. Or all who would claim kinship or connection. Just trying to provide those moments where God's glory can be revealed for everybody. Those moments where everyone feels like they matter. Everyone feels like they mean something. And that's what Jesus is trying to get us to do more and more and more, to provide those experiences for each other. And for the best friends out there somewhere that we've not even met yet. The Hebrews saw God's glory when they faced the wilderness. They hadn't experienced God like this before. And all the signs and the wonders were impersonal and distant. God didn't talk to them. But now they were connected to God directly. And they were connected to one another. And their common experience of what they've witnessed, what they'd endured, and what they'd complained about. But now, facing the wilderness and seeing the glory of God, they now had hope. Now they saw a way. And they were thankful. Or they were sure there wasn't a way. God was making a way. Daily. God is doing and will do the same for you. In the name of the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen. As the ushers come forward and we celebrate this time of